Why don't you identify yourself? I'm not used to being in front of cameras.
Who is?
Why don't you identify yourself? And then
I'm
tell
Anita
people what our
Nance,
program.
and I'm director of the Sanderson History Club program. And this is something that we do, we call it a pilgrimage to Mary Ellen Pleasant's grave each year in June. I'm not sure about when her birthday is, but we do know that it's the birth month of Mrs. Elena Albert, who introduced us to Mary Ellen Pleasant. And Mrs. Albert passed. There were those of us, Jesse Ward was our driver that day, who brought Mrs. Albert's ashes up. This isn't generally known because we didn't get permission to do it, but we poked them around the headstone there. So it's a thing that we kind of enjoy doing. You know, we kind of like to keep alive those people that have made a contribution, and a big contribution in some way, and it gives some of us the strength to continue in some way to do something for ourselves. Who put that there?
A group of white. We don't know who these people are, but once this grave site is where she was originally buried by the Sherwood family back in 1904. There was almost nothing here to indicate she was buried here. Alan Williams, who is a European-American friend of the society and a friend of Elena Albert, and some other people got together. He commissioned this sculpture. I don't remember who did the sculpture. And they came out here and took this piece of marble, which came out of one of the homes with which Mary Ellen Pleasant was associated, and dedicated this memorial to her. And for many years thereafter, there was an annual meeting of the Sanderson History Club. We would come up here for a little ceremony, both recognizing Mary Ellen Pleasant as kind of an unknown part of our history, and Mrs. Elena Albert is secretly buried under here. We did that because we knew that she would, as a poor person and as a poor organization, we didn't have any way of creating a separate grave, and we thought she'd be most interested in being with Mrs. Pleasant because she was the one who kept her memory alive more than anyone else. This marker was put on, we think, by a group of local people who feel that Mary Ellen Pleasant should not be honored. So they call her Mammy Pleasant, which is her most familiar historical name. And I don't know what
a name which she despised.
Yes.
And I don't know what Eclampus Vitus means.
From something like Clampus.
But they call themselves the Mammy Pleasant Benevolent Society.
Benevolent.
Was one of San Francisco's leading entrepreneur that where all of her talents were utilized, and for some reason or the other, and respected. You know that she was respected in both communities, the black and white community.
The band down so that.
Yeah, but also in terms of, because in that she wanted to also change the fact that Mary Ellen wasn't running a whorehouse, that, which was, at first that was initial thought, that why would this black woman be as powerful as she is without doing something illegal? And so Mrs. Albert, one of her main pursuit was to change these negative things, and to say no, that she wasn't running a whorehouse, that she was helping people. She was helping those who would not be able to get a job or find a place to live because they were poor and because they were black.
Something about this woman that still excites passion in people, It's been, 80 years since she's been gone?
Yeah, and never a scholarly work on her yet. And that's what our responsibility is.
So this is, at one time, was not a very well-tended section of the cemetery. This is really one of the older parts of the cemetery. But in my understanding, this at one time was a rather prestigious place to be buried if you died in this area, as you can see from some of the more monumental tombs up on the hill.
Was this a segregated cemetery at ever?
I don't think so. I don't know what the history of black people in the city of Napa is. My understanding is that the Sherwood, the woman who took Mrs. Pleasant in, had once taught at a colored school and had been a Red Cross worker and was very sympathetic to the plight of the ex-slaves.
Her husband was.
And I don't know the whole story, but clearly the fact that she took in a woman who was near death and tried to nurse her back to health just out of generosity of her heart is what we think. But of course Helen Holdridge, the biographer, thinks that she was trying to get her hold of whatever fortune she may have had left. But she never profited.
They weren't a poor family. Sure.
Well, yeah, I don't believe that they took her in and took her. I think it was just simply out of human kindness, which Helen Holdridge does not believe exists.
I think that's true.
So, Mr. Grenage has prepared some music, both memorializing both the people who are buried here. Elena Albert, I can't remember what year we came out here for that, but died rather suddenly at Moffett Hospital.
78 or 79.
Yeah, about at that time. And she was 71 at the time. And she was an amateur historian. By amateur, we mean she was never trained to do research, but she was very interested in black Madonnas of Europe. What that whole phenomenon was a connection with these ancient black female statues that are now Madonnas, but at one time may have been representations of the Egyptian goddess Isis. We don't know. That's early European history. She was interested in black settlement in the West. She was born in North Dakota herself, raised in Montana. Her mother was the first female barber in Alaska. It was an amazing family. She was a Garveyite. She was very associated with a lot of leftist movements,
yes.
Active in the church, but always was very clear that she did not belong to any and never intended to join any.
That's right.
Because she couldn't deal with some of the reactionary viewpoints that a lot of church people take on social issues. But she was a wonderful friend and inspiration. I was sorry that I was in my 30s when she was in her 70s, because we became very good friends, and it was we always had a kick when we got together.
She was fun. It was Mrs. Albert that first told me about Mary Ellen Pleasant, and I was just amazed, excited to hear about this great woman who had the audacity to sue everybody in San Francisco until she got her rights, and to win every time, to go on to learn how to invest her money and make a fortune, to underwrite the raid on Harper's Ferry by John Brown, to help numerous people to live so broadly that her community was not limited to any little small racial group or anything of the kind, but to have friends from writing her from all inconceivable places. People knew about Mary Ellen Pleasant. In the 70s, I had opportunity to interview a person named Louis Alberga, who had known Mary Ellen Pleasant. He was about 100 years old then. He had been a lieutenant in the First World War, and he told me how Mary Ellen Pleasant, at evening time on Market Street, people would line Market Street to waiting for Mary Ellen Pleasant to make her evening drive along Market in her Phaeton. She would sit back in the back of her Phaeton and in this horse-drawn and drive up Market Street and then down the other side, and people knew that it was time for their promenade when they saw the arrival of Mary Ellen Pleasant. She was somebody. She was somebody who asserted herself. She was someone who showed people what the possibilities of your life are if you learn to stand up not only for yourself, but for others, and stop saying, I can't do that, or we can't do it. She never even considered that as a possibility, and neither did Mrs. Albert. That's why I think it's splendid that both of them are right there. I feel a real kinship with Mrs. Albert and Mrs. Pleasant coming here. I feel this a real pilgrimage for me, because I like to keep connected to the ancestors who have given us so much and who continue, even through our lives, to speak to our spirits. Those are my recollections.
When was the memorial put?
There's no year on there.
Yeah,
Is it on there?
no, I didn't see it yet.
We'll have to
What
check
year
with...
did you come back, Mark?
1973.
I think it was, I'm thinking now, I think it was probably 1971 or 72.
And who designed the head?
A sculptor who
yeah.
was a member of our society, who is still, Alan Williams, R. Alan Williams, who's retired. And he had that year been given the first prize by the California Arts Institute. What's the name of it? Something like Arts Institute. And this piece of marble, I'm sure they told you, came from her home on Octavia Street, part of the step there. And he mounted this on the... This one we were not too happy about. A letter was written to a Dr. Charles Shoemate, whoever these E-Clampers Vitus people are. I think they used to ride in the night, Dr. Turner said. So wild and woolly characters. But anyway, apparently they had kind of a love for Mary Ellen and thought that they should put their little mark on.
So anyway, a large number of people. Mrs. Sue Bailey Thurman, who is also a historian, who wrote a chapter on Mary Ellen Pleasant as the mother of civil rights, as she called her in California, often financed our trips in the past up to...
This one too.
She financed it again today.
Yes.
And she...
She's president of the Sanderson Foundation.
yeah, she's connected with the Sanderson organization. The connections here, but the common thread is everybody believes that this was a remarkable woman, not just a sort of a eccentric figure of our past, but really somebody who had something, who had a deep and abiding commitment to the freedom of all people, because she was not just behind black organizations, but she seemed to give money to anybody that happened to be in need, and often impulsively. The people didn't understand why, you know, and why she would just suddenly hand what was substantial amounts of money to anybody, but that's what's just, we think that's because she had a generous and not a calculating nature. But there's something about her sense of humor, her courage, her steadfastness that inspires a lot of people to want to keep her a memory alive. Maybe at some point in the future, with all these people who are obviously interested, we can do more than just keep her memory alive, but we can start teaching people about what she was really about.
I don't mind saying that I feel very close to the sacred music of Black America when I play these instruments, because almost all the ragas and the forms that we know of as the spirituals and the blues and sort of the same thing can be traced back through those ancient forms of invocation that are inherent in the ragas, which are the language of time. So it's environmental music and that invocation and that the Chinese were very, very, and still are very much into that gathering and honoring of the ancestors, to send up the chi up and have that blessing come down. And that I ask for today in the reality of that tradition, because we can use a little guidance, little guidance now as we collectively go back. The story, as I know it, of Mary Ellen Pleasant, and there's some books available now. There's some people that have written about her early life before she was married and known as Pleasant. It's an extraordinary untold story of America.